us from NASA / Eclipse, North American Software Association,
Associates.
is it,
Associates.
Michaela? Associates, AKA, we just affectionately call you Eclipse. So NASA is the company that owns the software which we use, which is Eclipse. So she is we're going to pick her brain. I hope you came prepared, Michaela, because I only have half a brain on any given day. So we're going to rely on you. But before that, as always, we come together and one of the reasons that we get together each month, hopefully over time, we will continue to info share, get to know each other, see some familiar faces, and just get that cohesiveness that is really, really hard. I know each one of you is in your own organization, your own offices. Everybody kind of has unique ways of doing business, but we all do the same things day in, day out. We follow loosely some of the same policies and procedures, and it's just nice to have some colleagues readily available when we might run into some problems. So with that, I am going to call upon, first, we have a group at the Catna Insurance Agency in Laverne, and there's 3 individuals with us today. I'm so excited because previously they didn't have a camera. So I was told this morning that they have a camera. I'm going to let you guys just introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about each one of you. And then if you came with a collective tip or trick or a success in your office, and or if you have a pain point that you want to ask advice of the group. Welcome.
Sure. Okay, I'm Caitlin Anderson. I from Catna, but I recently graduated college and now I'm back working full time as an agent in the agency.
And you just graduated in the spring from St. Thomas, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Kroll. I've been with Catna Insurance Agency. I will be starting year number 33 in November. And success story, or what we were talking about, I think would be more or less to listen to your client. If you don't know the answer, assure them that you will find the answer and get back to them. I think the hardest thing has been over the years is this past year, because we've never had to rewrite so many policies and try to put them someplace else and have companies that will not take new business. And I think that has been really a hard struggle this year. Lots of work.
Yes. I probably some of those years, Marilyn, you could put those together and they still wouldn't be as hard as some of the difficulties that we've experienced in the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So fun to see you have someone starting their insurance career and then someone so seasoned and wise for Caitlin to ask all the questions.
I'm Nicole. I obviously work at Catna Insurance. I've been here for 7 years in April. I had to write down what my answers to the questions were because I can't think about it. So I couldn't think of any tips or tricks that nobody has already said, but plenty of pain points, I guess. One of them is just having enough time in the day to do what I want to get done. And so at the end of the day, if I didn't get everything done that I wanted to, I kind of struggle to feel like it was a successful day. Another thing that I struggle with is deciding what is most important as far as like my workload and deciding what comes first, because I have multiple things that I need to do and I just struggle knowing which one I should do first.
Well, I think you're in good company, Nicole. I think we all are feeling that. Raise your hand if you ever feel that way by the end of the day. I know here at the state office, we had a meeting, quick meeting this morning, and we were talking about that concept. Just, really, I don't know about you, but I'm doing something and then I'm almost like also working on 4 things that are lined up for me to do after I do this one thing. So I just really encourage you guys to give yourself some space and grace. And like, I'm here to validate you. You do so much. And, I think there's power in focusing on what you're working on now. And it is hard to prioritize. Does anyone have maybe any insight in how they prioritize? I got some good prioritizers here that I could call on. Like
I'll go, Robin.
Maddie. Oh, awesome,
Um,
Erin. Thank you.
I prioritize by putting my things into Eclipse. So if I have an email that comes in, that's like an endorsement that maybe isn't for a couple days, or it's supposed to happen this weekend, or something like that, I'll create the follow-up in my Eclipse, and I will set that out a couple days or what have you, and then delete it out of my inbox. A lot of emails in my inbox, seeing a lot of that overwhelms me. And so having it into Eclipse where I can put it on the day I need to do it helps me a lot. And then I can tackle, I always call it my wall. I can tackle my wall for that day. If I know I'm not going to get to something that day, or I can push that off again another day, I'll move it out so that I can physically see what I have to get done, and it's not so overwhelming for me. But I do try to utilize the clips in that way.
I love that. I love the power in because you're actually touching the task, right? Like, and prioritize, like, when does this have? You're putting it into Eclipse, setting that follow-up, setting the time where you have to return to that, and then it can just be off your mind. Plus, you get the endorphin rush of deleting the email out of your Eclipse. Not, so wonderful. Thank you, Erin. And thank you, Nicole, Marilyn, and Caitlin, for introducing yourselves and being with us. I know that, Caitlin, I think this is your first time, but I know Nicole and Marilyn, you've been on the other calls. So really want to welcome you and thank you for your time. Also, Sharon Carlson is with us, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Look at your fancy office. Is that your actual office?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Welcome.
So I'm Sharon and I work for the Peters Agency in Goodhue, and I came from a small mutual office before, so I had some insurance background. So I started in June, so I've been here a couple of months, and I'm focusing on farms and health insurance. Tips or tricks, I make cheat sheets, kind of information sheets for my farm quoting. So I'll put all of the quoting information on one piece of paper, so I'm not looking through 10 different places trying to find the information. That's been really helpful to have everything in one location. Also doing property maps of the buildings, making sure all of that's on file for other employees to go find the same information. It's very helpful. And
when you say property map, when you say property maps, Sharon, what do you mean by that?
Just labeling all of the buildings on the farms.
So you're doing like a hand sketch?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
I was used to using those, so it's very helpful for me to have property maps of all of the farms, so there's no question of what building is which building that's listed. And my struggles would be coming from working with one company to working with multiple companies. It's very difficult to pick up everyone's tips and tricks and underwriting guidelines and stuff like that. And
I agree. I agree, because then as soon as you master it, then it sometimes changes.
yes.
So
yes.
we are all adept at adapting to changes and lots of information. So don't feel like you're alone, Sharon. I think we also, if I asked raise of hands on that, I'm sure everybody would feels that as well. So welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. Now for the star of the hour, I'm so glad that she's with us, and it's a new forum. Usually, Michaela, when you're with us, we're at a hotel or in a banquet room, right? So glad that we can just tap into your expertise and knowledge in this really user-friendly way and get you to join us. And I have some questions that are kind of just on my mind. But I want for you guys, all of our support staff, I want you to just jump in and ask questions. But I think maybe just to start, Michaela, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself personally, and then things that maybe we should know about NASA, if like how it was founded, or if any type of information about that, just to give us a little bit about you and about the company.
Yeah, so I'm Michaela, and I have been with NASA coming up on 15 years already. So prior to coming to NASA, I worked at a help desk doing computer support for about 6 years. So I come with more of the technology side of things when I came to NASA, which is a great attribute in a lot of our troubleshooting and testing and everything that we do here. And so I am married to my husband of 18 years, and we have an almost 17-year-old and a 15-year-old who just got her permit. So that has been very fun for the last couple of weeks as we get her trained in on driving. But yeah, so that's kind of my life story. NASA, I think, was founded in '89, if I remember correctly, by a bank owner who decided to develop software. They had an insurance agency in their bank, and he just wanted software that he could organize his policies and stuff like that. So he wrote the product, and over the years, it's gone from him owning it to one of our programmers then bought it, who is now the current owner, Bruce Dickoff. And so yeah, it's just continued to grow over the years. We definitely pride ourselves here in our customer service compared to our competitors. So that is one thing that we really take pride in being able to answer the phones when people call and having that customer relationship if any questions are needed or training or anything like that. So.
Well, we really appreciate that. And I think that is why we've built such a strong relationship with NASA, that over the years, that is invaluable. For those of you maybe that have worked in a different agency that had a different agency management system. I know that I've been in a different agency and they used a larger organization, and there was long holds. Like if you had a question and you called customer service, it was not how we are used to with Eclipse, where we can call the customer service number and get a live person that's very knowledgeable, that's very willing to help. So I did put their number, I'm sure you all have it, but their phone numbers in chat, as well as their support email address. I know at times, if you can send your questions there as well. So just letting you guys know that is always an option, and they're really, really so helpful and so accessible. And I really appreciate that, Michaela. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks again for being with us. So can we start with follow-ups? I think that's a great place to start. I did have that on my list as well, just because we're transitioning in this electronic world to setting more and more follow-ups in our system versus sending an email or sending things through the United States Postal Service. We're just attaching, getting it into Eclipse and setting a follow-up and to each individual person throughout the agency, whether that's the agent. But a lot of times it's going to this group of people, this support staff group of people. So questions, I think, I'll share my screen. Just make sure that we know how to set a follow-up, how to put the follow-ups on our main screen, whatever that's called. And let's see, what else is on my list here? Threads, like how do we have a follow-up and then add to it or
Okay.
change it to someone else?
Mhm.
So, and if you guys have questions along the way, just, jump in.
Sure. Which customer did you say that you use as a test customer, Robin?
I think it's just test. You put in
Just
test.
Test. You can let me type. There we go. The Jane test. Or
Probably,
Joe,
yep, or
doesn't
Joe
matter.
test.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay.
Or they're the same one.
All right. So to put a follow-up into the system, essentially you're going to do it through the documentation screen. So you can see anywhere that you get this doc follow-up entry button, that is where the documentation is going to go. So if you're on, like here we are on the customer screen, if you click on the doc follow-up entry button from this screen, it's going to create that documentation and put it at the customer level. Now, if your documentation or your follow-up is specific to a certain policy, then we would always recommend that you open up the policy first and then click on the doc follow-up entry button. Because of that reason is that when you open it, you can see then the attached to is attaching it to that specific policy. So it will make it easier for you to find documentation in the future when you're looking at that doc list where that documentation is stored permanently, because then you can narrow it down and say, show me my documentation that is specific to this policy, so that your list is much smaller than if you were looking at all of the documentation for that customer as a whole. In terms of putting a follow-up into the system, because it's tied to a documentation, you really can't put just a follow-up into the system. A follow-up will always create a documentation entry in the doc list as well, which is completely fine. You just want to make sure that you fill out your body area of your documentation up here, and then you will click on the Make Follow-Up button down at the bottom to create your follow-up. Now, when you're putting it in, by default, the follow-up will just be assigned to you, just because you are the person that is putting the follow-up in. But if you need to assign it to somebody else, so maybe you're not responsible for it and somebody else in your office is responsible for it, you can select that person in the drop-down. If you need to create it for multiple people, maybe there's multiple people in your office and you're each, taking care of part of the task, you can click the Add Others option. And that will give you a list of everybody where then you can select who you all want to assign that follow-up to. And then you can also type in the follow-up description, because that will then go towards each of those follow-ups that are created. So, Adam can have, this is a test on his follow-up description, and then Annalise can have just test. So, it just depends on what you want to display on their follow-up description when that follow-up is created. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. If you do leave that follow-up description blank, once you click OK and select multiple people, that will override anything that you put into the follow-up description down here at the bottom. So if you didn't put anything in there, then whatever you put in the follow-up description down here at the bottom is what will fill on every follow-up that is created. The follow-up dates, you're just choosing when do you want that follow-up to show up that it's due for taking care of. Now, we show our follow-ups a day ahead of time. So if you pick the 17th, it's actually going to show up on the 16th, just because we're showing it in the event that you complete all of your work for that day and you want to move on to tomorrow's work. If you decide, nope, it's due tomorrow and I'm not going to deal with it till tomorrow, that doesn't matter. If you don't do anything with it on the 16th when it pops up, it'll still be there tomorrow on the 17th when you get into the office.
And it rolls, like if you didn't do it on the 17th, it would roll to the 18th. It just rolls to the next day.
Correct. It keeps showing up until it's taken care of or rolled out to the next time frame if it's a frequency of anything other than every day. So the frequency defaults to every day. That just means it's going to show up every day until you close it. So the date that you select, it's going to pop up in your My Reminders list, and then it's going to show up every single day until you choose to close that reminder. You can't roll everyday frequency reminders because it's just going to keep showing up every day, and we always show it a day ahead of time, so we can't roll them out to the next day. The importance level is color coded based on the importance level. So you can see if you choose high, it makes the body area pink. If it's low, it's going to be blue. And that's just so that when you're in your follow-ups list, it stands out to you so that you can maybe deal with your high importance follow-ups first and deal with your low importance ones last. So if you just leave it set to normal, it'll just be the blank white. And then ultimately we have the follow-up description. So the follow-up description is just some extra notes for you to put in on the follow-up itself. It is different than the body of the documentation that you put in here. So the body of the documentation that's tied to the follow-up, that will be permanent immediately when you hit update down at the bottom. Anything that you put in the follow-up description will be editable up until the point that that follow-up is closed. So we would never really use the follow-up description for anything regarding documentation purposes because that won't be locked down until the follow-up is closed at the end. So, you know, if you need that date and time stamp on it that, hey, I couldn't make changes to it, put it in the body area, leave the follow-up description just as a kind of reminder for you of what you're doing with the follow-up, but really doesn't, you know, meet the guidelines for E&O purposes. Is there any questions on this screen before we update and kind of show you the different screens to look at for the follow-ups?
Everybody good?
All right, so I am going to put in just follow-up description. Might help if I can type. Just so we can see the difference between the two. So once you have your documentation and follow-up in the system, you can see if you click on doc list here, that documentation was created here. You can always tell when a documentation has a follow-up on it because you'll see that follow-up button up in the top right. If your documentation does not have a follow-up attached to it, you would not see this button. So you can access the follow-up through the doc list, but otherwise the follow-up list here on the customer will show you your follow-ups pertaining to this particular customer. So it won't show you all of your follow-ups in the system, just the ones that pertain to this policy or customer, depending on what selections you have up in the top left-hand corner here. So if you open up the follow-up by clicking on the button to the right of the date, you can see now we actually flopped everything around. So the documentation portion is actually at the bottom and the follow-up portion is up at the top. So here you can see that follow-up description is still editable at this point. So that's why we say, you know, for documentation purposes, don't put anything in there that you need locked down immediately for E&O purposes. Here you can change all of the options that you made the selections for initially when you were putting the follow-up in. So if you want to push the follow-up date to a different date, if you want to change the frequency, the importance level, who it's assigned to, you can do that all at this point. You can also close the follow-up by checking the box up here to close the follow-up. Here at NASA, we actually recommend that you either type in the follow-up description what you did to take care of that follow-up, because you have a setting that is turned on that will automatically document then what is in the follow-up description. So you can either put your notes there or you can click on the append to doc down here and add additional notes as far as like what you did to close that follow-up. So what task did you do? Did you go out to the company website to make sure that, you know, the endorsement was processed correctly on their side? Did you verify that the download come in? Like whatever your task was, you can put your notes in either place. They will document. Just make sure that you do that before you close the follow-up.
Okay, so just to be clear on that, Michaela, so if I'm done with a follow-up, and I want to add to my documentation entry for the permanent record,
Mhm.
I can either just put that information in the follow-up description box at the top there, or I can hit that append to doc and add in an additional entry there.
Correct. Yep. Because if I remember right, and maybe we should check that setting, or maybe some of you might even know who've done follow-ups before. But if I remember correctly, you guys do have the setting turned on that when you close a documentation, anything that is in the follow-up description automatically adds a documentation record with the verbiage that was in the follow-up description. And so then it'll say follow-up, blah, 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 with a follow-up description, was closed on what date by whatever login actually closed that follow-up. So it adds that documentation in on that documentation record.
So Bev, hi Bev. Can I task you to check where our setting is?
Yes.
Raise your hand. Personally, I think it's more helpful if we could just put a description, if we have additional information that we want in the permanent record on the documentation, that we could just put it there at the follow-up description, because then we wouldn't have to hit, yeah, Erin.
Hey, Robin.
Yeah.
It already does that.
It does. Okay, so you know that. Okay,
Yep.
all right. I don't work with follow-ups a ton, so thank you,
Yep.
Erin. So I think that's just easier, don't you, Erin? That way we don't have to hit append to doc. It's in there. So thank you, Erin, for
Yeah.
verifying it. Perfect.
And you always end up making like your own anyways, of like how you process it or whatever. But I like having that initial, what you first type in there will always be in there. So if you update that line, it is saved, like it's not like, oh crap, I wrote that in there, but it didn't save into the notes. It's just, it is there from that original like wording that you used, essentially, if I'm making sense.
Yes,
But yeah.
Work in progress, you're adding to your work. So you start your work, and anything that you do and you add is in the permanent record then.
All right. So I am going to hit update on this record to just update that information that I had changed. I'll show you the two different areas where you can access your follow-ups on your Work Center. So when you log into Eclipse, this is what we call the Work Center. So this is the main screen that you see right when you log into Eclipse. If you don't have this My Follow-Ups tile, which most of you probably do because that is a default tile that shows up when you first log into Eclipse ever. If you don't have that tile, you can click on the tile options down at the bottom, and then you can add that My Follow-Ups tile by just simply placing a check mark next to My Follow-Ups. And if you make that change, you can click Update down at the bottom. One thing to note about your follow-ups is you can actually move them to different columns. So if you say, I want my follow-ups in a different column, you can right-click on any of the headers, and you can say, make a new column. You can move it to column 1 or 3 because we currently have 3 columns. You can drag anywhere you see a double-headed arrow, like here. You can click and you can drag and make it bigger or smaller based off of whatever size you want to make it. The biggest thing is after you make any changes, just make sure to hit that Save Layout button down at the bottom. And if you decide you made a change and you just don't like it, you can always reset the layout as well. One other thing just to kind of talk about, just because a lot of people we see when you're connecting in with agencies that I find is a very useful tool. If you're logging into Eclipse and your screen size is smaller and you're having to make it large every day, instead of using that maximize square up at the top, if you resize it down in the bottom by using the arrows, you can go to Setup, Window, and then save your window size. So anytime, just don't maximize, because if you maximize and save your window size, it won't save it. But if you click and drag it out to be full screen, essentially, and then save your window size or save your parent window size, then you won't have to keep resizing it every single day when you log in.
Will you do that for me? Because I do have to resize it every day.
You do
'cause-
have to resize it every day?
Yep, so if you would just save that.
Yeah, so we'll have to make it smaller first. No, I'm confusing myself with the two. Okay, so now it's restored down and go to setup, window, save parent window size. So the parent window is actually this outer shell, so the outside. This would be considered the child window. So you have to do both of them. So don't ever use this to resize your window. So like in this case, when it opens that size, just click and drag it out to be full screen. And then in this case, we'll do setup, window, and save window size. Now you have to do it for each screen. So like, let's say you get into the search screen. If you want the search screen to be larger, click and drag it to whatever size you want it to be and go to setup, window, and save window size. So each screen, you have to do it like the customer screen, once you open a policy screen. But once you do it for each of those screens, it will carry through to every other one. So it's not like you have to do it for every single customer. It's just for the customer screen one time. And then going forward, it will retain that information. So that way you don't have to resize it every day.
Questions on follow-ups? Does anybody have any questions? When you were talking, Michaela, how do you see people across agencies use the task/note list?
It really varies. I mean, we'll connect in with people and they'll have their grocery list on there. Like, oh, remember the kids have a dentist appointment at 1 p.m. You know, some agencies have our contact information in there, like support@nasasoft.com, so they know what email address to use, and our phone number. So that way it's just right in front of them if they need to get a hold of us.
Ooh, I
It
like
can
that
be,
idea.
yeah, I mean, just something that you use frequently so you don't have to go digging for the information is really what people use that for a lot.
I think that would be a really good thing if you did have, you know, Nicole was asking about prioritization. So you could put your most important tasks there. I just like deleting things. I don't know if anybody's like that, right? Putting
Yep.
the things down and then being able, once you do accomplish them, to delete those. And those task note list is in no way, shape, or form tied to follow-ups, right? It's just
No.
sort of a static box that you can
Yep.
use as like your to-do or your post-it note kind of place.
Correct.
Okay, awesome.
So as far as follow-ups go, the My Follow-ups on the tile here, we're only going to show you past and present follow-ups. We will not show you anything that's future dated beyond tomorrow's date because we always show a day ahead of time. So if you have something 2 weeks out, it will not display in this My Follow-ups tile. What we're showing here is just the date, the customer or the policy that it was created from, and then your follow-up description and the body of what was in the documentation. So that's what you're seeing there. You can open up the follow-up from here. It's going to look like the screen that we were just looking at. So your description and information is up at the top. Your documentation is down at the bottom. The last follow-up screen that you have is the My Follow-ups up here on your bar at the top. Now this bar is viewed no matter what screen you're on. So you can go to a customer screen, a policy screen. This whole bar is always going to be here at the top of your screen. So you can access your follow-ups at any point. When you come into this screen, you can actually see down here at the bottom that we're showing all dates by default. So we're going to show past, present, and future dated follow-ups in this screen. Now you can always use the date options down at the bottom. So like an example that I like to give is if you're going on vacation in 2 weeks and you either need to take care of your follow-ups, you know, ahead of time, you can see what follow-ups are that you have assigned to yourself during that time frame. Or you can decide, hey, I'm going to be gone long enough that I need to assign it to somebody else to take care of during my absence. So then you can easily narrow those down and go assign them to other people. You'll see your importance levels. Like I said, like the pink stands out, so it's a high priority. Blue is low priority. So those options are really nice. This role follow-up dates button down here at the bottom, this is only used when a frequency is something other than every day. So when you choose like monthly or annually or semi-annually, those are recurring follow-ups, okay? So it means it's going to pop up at the point that that date comes due. So let's say this was a monthly one, for instance. When it comes up this month, you wouldn't actually close it because once you hit close, that follow-up is done and it will never appear again in your follow-up list. Frequency of anything other than every day means that it's a recurring follow-up. So what you're going to do in those cases is you would append to the doc in this case. So you would want to hit append, and what you did this month to take care of whatever the follow-up was, and then you would hit update down at the bottom to save your appended item, and then you can highlight the row and choose the roll follow-up dates from here. This is if you want to roll multiples at the same time. If you had it open when you were appending and you just want to use the roll option in that screen, if you want to do one at a time, you definitely can do that. In this case, because our frequency is every day, you can see that the roll follow-up date option is actually grayed out because you can't roll a follow-up that has a frequency of every day. Everything else, that button would not be grayed out.
So is that kind of like saving it? Like, oh, I was in there, now I'm
Yep.
gonna roll it, but
Yep.
basically it's just, I'm gonna save it, it's gonna go away, and then they'll
Yep.
come back, whatever the
Yeah.
occurrence is, like you said, monthly. How do
Yep.
you see agencies using that? Is that the renewal tool, or like what types of things would you code as not every day?
So a lot of times that we see this is in situations where they have prospects. And so let's say they quoted a policy this year and the insured decided not to go with them, but they're going to keep trying. So they roll that out a year from now, and then they reach back out to that customer again to try to get that business again. So
And then if they
that
would
is
write it, then they would
Yep.
close it.
correct. Yep.
I like that. You know, sometimes people are looking for a marketing aspect. That gives them some capability.
Yep, for sure. Any other questions on the follow-ups?
Since we're on the work center, Michaela, can you talk about how, I don't think I have saved like my favorite reports. You know, we have talked a lot about the exception report and the expiration report. How can we put them on the workstation?
Yeah,
The work
so
center, excuse me.
in the tile options here, the first point would be to check mark the, oh, sorry, not website favorites. You said favorite reports. Okay, so you would check mark favorite reports and hit update down at the bottom. And then you'll be able to see that that tile now appeared. So over here, this is where it moved over here. But again, you can change that. So I can right click on it and say move it to column 3. So that way then it will, there we go. So now it's down here under favorite reports. So the first step is just getting your tile on your window and then placing it wherever on your screen you want to place it. Once that tile is there, how you make a favorite report is you go into your reports area and you find the report that you want to make a favorite. So like if we're talking about the policy exception report, for instance, we would come in here, open up the policy exception report. You would choose your option. So like in Robin's case here, she might have it set to all because she's running it for all locations, everything. But you as a producer, you might choose whoever is the producer in your office. And once you make all of your selections, like do I want all responsibilities? Do I want all billing methods? Make all of your selections. You'll actually click on make favorite down here. And then you'll give it a name. And so like in this case, you can still call it the same thing. So I can call it policy exception report. And I can hit save down at the bottom. Now
Oh,
you can
there
see
it is.
after I hit save, it popped up on that tile. And now if I just close out of all of these different screens, when I click on this button next to the favorite report, it opens it back up exactly to the selections that I had, so that when I'm creating the reports, I don't have to make those selections every single time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm opening it up to the group. Did anyone come with a list of questions or a question that I want to make sure we're at 2:11, so I want to make sure we definitely address any questions that you guys have top of mind. All right, I'm going to kind of continue on my list. Something that comes up is PL Raider import export. Any type of insight on that, Michaela? I know that maybe that's an involved question, but just I want to make sure that everybody on the call knows that there's capability with PL Raider.
Yeah, so in terms of Eclipse, when it comes to PL Raiders, there isn't a whole lot that we can talk about because of the fact that the process is pretty simple in an Eclipse standpoint. When you go into Eclipse and you go into your policy, let's see here. So do you not have it set up on your side? Do you have it set up for yourself?
PL Raider, I don't, because I don't use it.
Okay. And it maybe is just not showing up because it's a farm policy. If we went into like an auto policy, it might, do you have a recent customer that I can go into that would have like an auto policy?
You can go into me. Oh, but I think my auto policy is,
Is it under, there you are, this one?
yeah, but I think it's canceled
Okay.
currently.
We'll just go, if you don't mind us going into
That's-
here. So
that's fine.
when you're in a policy, you get this rate export button down at the bottom, and that's it. That's all that we do in Eclipse, because what it's doing is it's actually creating a file in the background. It's either going to be an AL3 file or an XML file. It's just a coding verbiage. So in that file, it has all of the information about this policy. So the policy information, the coverages, the risk information, drivers, all of the information stored in that file. Because you guys use PL Raider, that's a web-based one. So what that means is you just go into PL Raider, then you click on import, if I remember correctly. It already has the location saved in PL Raider of where we've placed that file because it's a standard location. And then you just hit import, and then it probably asks you a bunch of questions about the policy when you're importing it. But then that's it. At that point, it's passed that file and the information that Eclipse houses over to them so that you can do your quoting then with all of the companies that you have within PL Raider.
So I know this is kind of a more involved, perhaps, if you aren't super adept at it. But maybe just show of hands, people that are using that rate export. Any questions with PL Raider? We're just finding that having our information and running our quotes through PL Raider. I know sometimes, not all companies are on there. It doesn't rate farm, that type of thing. But all of those analytics, our companies are really looking at that data. And so if we can run quotes in the beginning and do that rate export and run them through PL Raider, it really helps when we talk to the powers that be at these companies, because even though maybe we don't have production, they do look at the quoting activity. So it just, by running through the PL Raider, you're getting more bang for your buck. You're quoting things with those multiple companies without having to go into each of those sites. So I think if you have any questions with that, like on the Eclipse side, make sure you're calling their customer service. But, you know, with PL Raider, Roberta in our office here at the state office, she uses PL Raider and she's very adept at it. So if you have any kind of questions, make sure that you give her a jingle or drop her an email, and she would be able to help you with that. How to email directly out of Eclipse. So I love what Erin said about getting all of her emails, getting her information into Eclipse, and then using that as the operating system to communicate with your insureds and to manage your workflow. I know that in the past I have talked with people that, and I get it, like, you know, our email inbox is very personal and very important, and how we interact with emails and workflow is very personal. But I really encourage, if you are not in a regular practice of emailing out of Eclipse to your insureds, to your company people, I highly recommend that you start to, when you can, email directly out of Eclipse, because it's going to document those transactions, those emails, that communication. You are going to be able to delete it out of your Outlook and work directly with it through Eclipse. So Michaela, can you show us? My email should be set up, so we should be able to send a test email.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, when it comes to emailing out of Eclipse, the first step is if you've never set it up before, give us a call at NASA here, and anybody in support can help you get your email in Outlook linked to Eclipse, because that's the first part. We always have to have the two linked together in order to send emails out of Eclipse. Because essentially, when we're sending an email out of Eclipse, we're just passing that email over to Outlook, and then we're using your email provider to send the email out. So it's not like you're getting a different email address or anything through us when you're sending those emails out. You're still using your email to send an email out. There's multiple different ways that you can easily send emails to your customers. So if you open up the customer screen, if you have a default email address listed on your customer, like we do here, if you click on email to the left, that's actually a button. And you'll see when I click on that, it actually opens up the email screen and it populates that email address into the two fields for you so that you don't have to type it in. So that's one of the ways that you can do it. The other way is you can actually go up to correspondence and send an email. And that's another way. And the last option is you can always click on the email web address button over here. So the button on the right is the same as the link on the left. It's just that a button is a single click on the right, and the link on the left is going to be a double click to get into that screen. But if you have multiple email addresses listed for your customer, more than just the default, if you click on the button to the right of the email or to the left of the email address here in this screen, that will also populate that email address into the two fields for you. So that is a really nice feature, again, that you can use to pre-populate that information. But otherwise, the email screen that we have set up is what you would typically see in like Outlook when you're sending an email. So the first option, we do have template options for you to set up if you wanted to set up an email template. Like if you're sending the same verbiage all the time when you're sending emails out and you don't want to have to keep retyping that, you can set up a template so that it'll pre-fill with that customer's information. So you can drag and drop form filling fields within the email so that it'll pre-populate, like with their salutation or their address or whatever you want. You can populate that with a template. So you could make those selections here. So I can see some people already have some set up, so you can definitely use those.
They're very useful. Can you show us quickly how to do just a simple template?
Yeah, so under setup and then email templates, you would come in here and you would hit add down at the bottom. And then you would give your template a description. So maybe if you want to call it like birthday email, if you're sending out something like that, whatever it might be. You don't populate your to CC or BCC field, but you could, populate the subject with happy birthday. And then in the body area, it kind of works like a letter. So like if you want to do the agency address, for instance, whatever you want to pre-populate, you can double click on that. Actually, we changed that. You have to drag and drop. So you can drag and drop that on there. So that way when this template is used on a customer level, it'll pre-populate that information in. You can also do addresses. So you can see you get a lot of different options as far as the customer's name, address, city, state, zip, if you want that to pre-fill in. So it all just depends. You just have to find what you're looking for in terms of like what you want to populate on there. If you want the date to populate on there, you just drag and drop those onto the form as well. And then after you're done, you just hit update. So you can see here, I've created it. It's called birthday email. I'm going to close out of the email screen and go back in. And now if I choose that email template, there it is. So now you can see it pre-populated with the agency's information and the date. That's kind of how the templates work. Biggest thing is we always say start at the top and work your way down, because if you start filling out the email and then you go back and choose a template, it'll ask you if you want to wipe out the information that you've already put in. So just make sure you start at the top and work your way down. But ultimately, when you're sending an email out, I'm going to change this just to my email address. And then you can see here that because we were in the customer screen when we created the email, it's going to attach it to the customer documentation. If you want to attach it at a policy level, again, if you open up the policy and then do the email option from there, it'll attach it at the policy level. But you can always click in the drop down and change the location too. So if you want to attach it at the policy level, you can just choose that at that time. The doc type will just default to email sent because this will be an email that was sent out of the system. And when that doc type is chosen as email sent, or when you drag and drop it goes to email received, it does give you additional options at the bottom of the documentation, like reply to email, resend email, forward email. So those buttons are derived off of the doc type, that you had selected when you had created it. Request a read receipt if you do that in here. Just one thing to be aware of with read receipts, this works anywhere, not just in Eclipse. But when you request a read receipt from a customer, so you're sending an email to them and you want to be acknowledged if they open that email, a couple things to be aware of. First, they have to be using Outlook on their side. So if you send it to somebody that's using Gmail, they're never going to get that notification. So don't rely heavily on getting that response back. Secondly, if they say no, because they are prompted with the question of, do you want to notify so-and-so that you've received this email, they can always say no to it too. So just because we're requesting it does not mean that you'll receive a response back. When you send an email, it's automatically documented for E&O purposes with a date and time stamp of when that email was sent. But you have the follow-up options down here at the bottom, so you can create a follow-up to follow up on it at a later date. So maybe if you want to set it for 2 days out, in case you don't hear from that customer, maybe they didn't reply and you want to check in again, you can create that follow-up, at the time that you're sending the email. Once it becomes permanent documentation, you can always go back into the documentation and create a follow-up from that screen too. But if you know you need one, I would just create it at the time that you're sending. And one difference that you'll see in this screen is this template attachments. So template attachments is used if you have a generic letter. It does not have a date on it. It doesn't have a salutation that you're expecting to pre-fill with the customer's information. It's just a generic letter that you're sending over and over and over again. So maybe it's like a form that your customers have to fill out and you're sending it to different customers on different days. It's not a mass email type thing. We would want to put that in as a template attachment, because then on your server side, it's only adding the attachment one time. It's not adding it every single time you send that email out. Whereas if you're adding it through the add attachment screen, it's going to add it to your server every single time that that email is sent out. And obviously we don't want to do that for a generic blank document that doesn't have any crucial information on it. So use template attachments in those situations. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, you have your form filling fields up here at the top. So if you needed to add anything else, you can choose your options and just drag and drop that over, and it'll fill it based off of what field you added. If you hover over the fields, they give bubbles, so it'll tell you what's going to populate on the screen when you drop that field onto the screen.
Well, for me, that's worth the price of admission, because I had no idea that you could drag and drop those fields.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Any questions? Does anybody have any questions about emailing directly out of Eclipse? Spooled certificates, Michaela. Can you explain? Because I think there's still some confusion. When you see spooled certificates, what does that mean?
Yeah. So a spooled certificate is when you have a certificate set up on the customer, you've chose a frequency. And on that frequency, if you choose annual or renewal, so annual means that on your certificate holder, you are picking a date that you want that certificate to spool. A lot of people are hesitant about using the annual option simply because you have to be careful about what date you choose then to have it spool that certificate, because you want to ensure that the downloads that are renewing that policy have come in before that certificate spools. Otherwise, it's going to spool that certificate out with the old policy information or maybe the previous term. So annual is a little bit tricky when people choose that, because you got to choose the right date. Renewal means that, let's say you have like a CGL policy, a workers' comp, and a business auto, all tied to your certificate. And when that certificate creates, so anytime a renewal comes in, so let's say the renewal comes in for the business auto, but not the other two, it's actually going to spool the certificate because a renewal came in. But then it's not really correct yet quite at that point, because now you've got the updated information for the business auto, but the other two pieces haven't updated yet because the renewals haven't come through for those. So you can leave that certificate there and not do anything with it. Or you can say, I'm not ready to do anything with it because it's not updated. You can delete it. And then when the renewal comes in for, say, the workers' comp, for instance, it'll spool the certificates again. Well, we're still missing one of the policies. So again, you can leave it or you can delete it. But when that renewal comes in for that third one that's attached to the certificate, now your certificate is complete. So at that point is when then you can either print them, you can email them to the certificate holders if you have an email address listed for your certificate holder, or you can print them all out if you send them via mail if they need them that way too. Biggest thing is just make sure that, once you're done with them, that you delete them. So in your spooled certificates list, I think it's in daily. Yeah. So in your spooled search list, just remember that when you're done with them, you just highlight them and press delete on your keyboard and get rid of them. Because that just, as far as the state office goes, they're going to see them all. So they're going to have big numbers for all of the locations. So when you're done, just go ahead and delete.
So spooled certificates are certificates that are set up on a template. Right? So you go in, you set up a template for your certificate, and you're going to choose either the annual. Do you have to choose the frequency, I'm assuming, when you set up the template?
So you have three options, annual or renewal will automatically spool. If you leave it blank, that means that you're going to come to the customer and you're going to create them manually every time you need them.
It seems like that better option would always be to choose renewal. And then you're saying, once you send them out, you're done, then you just have to go in and delete the certificates
Yep.
out of that master list. It doesn't delete your template.
Correct. Your template
It'll
will always
spool,
stay there.
it'll
Yep.
spool next year.
Yep.
You are just deleting those actual
The ones that
certificates
were
for this
created.
year.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a little, and hey, everybody, we could do a whole 2 hours probably on certificates.
Yes.
If you have questions, that would be something that, I know Danielle in our office is really knowledgeable. She deals with certificates a lot. If you have questions, that would be an instance where I really would, encourage you to call Eclipse if you have specific questions. But it's like a muscle. If you don't typically work with certificates, as soon as you start to work with them, get more comfortable, it's not rocket science, right, Michaela? It's very figure outable.
Right.
But there are little things like this where there's different settings that you're going to just want to get comfortable with. But that spooled thing is there. So as I knew it would happen, Michaela, it's 2:31. We've already used up our whole hour. And so I am going to make sure that we're respectful of the time and let everybody know that Eclipse is the most important thing that we deal with on a daily basis. It is so important that we're comfortable with it. We know how to use it. We maximize it. We're doing everything we possibly can in there to be efficient and productive. And the documentation is so important for me. And, when we run into problems with customers, all your work, it's a place to document all your work. And so that really reaps rewards in the workflow process. And if we have questions, like I always say to my state office people, if I win the lottery and move to Cancun tomorrow, I need to have your documentation so I can just step right in and do your job for you. So I'm going to leave you with that. Go buy a lottery ticket. And if you win and you have to move to Cancun, I also encourage you to document and do all the things in Eclipse. And if you have any questions with that, now Michaela's friendly face, and I know she works directly with all the customer service people that do such a wonderful job for us at Eclipse. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being on the call. Remember to level up. And if you have questions that you think of after this and you just want to send them to me, I can certainly get answers and encourage Bev to send them out to everybody. So thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.